Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Good Fight podcast. I'm Kim Bigler, and I've got a special guest today who we have been actually trying to connect for a long time now. Miss Marie Gregory she's a founder of Brook It Forward. And a lot of people may have heard Brook It Forward about the birthday boxes that go on to bring blessings to so many people. It's not just about a birthday. It's far deeper than that, one of much hope. But what people may not know is where that hope actually comes from. And you will be very touched to find out that the hope that she carries to so many, it was actually birthed in pain and suffering from a loss from her daughter. And we will get into that. Those who are just tuning in or maybe don't know about the Good Fight podcast, I started this when my 17-year-old son, Phoenix, went down with a cardiac arrest, and it led to a global anoxic brain injury with being without a pulse for up to an hour. And I was desperately trying to find podcasts, people to talk to that would share some just deep water stuff when I was going through that valley. And I would hear testimonies done on podcasts, but they felt cleaned up to me. And I was really in the throes, and I needed someone to really walk me through emotions and things that maybe have been kept in the dark a little bit. And I needed that part. Because I was experiencing so much, I thought maybe this is just me, myself, and I. And yes, we can have great faith. Yes, we can take Jesus in the valley with us. But it's also, he's created others to help you walk that process. And so full testimonies is what I needed at the time. And so Marie is definitely going to share hers today. And welcome, Marie. I love you. I love you. I love you. Me. Yes. And she's already been ministering to me. So we turned on the camera. That was all gold. Maybe we could fit it in there. But also, before we continue, I do want to thank the Reminding Coffee Shop. If you have not been to the Reminding, Covington, Louisiana, they've got amazing coffee, amazing pastries, amazing goodies. I just bought these cross earrings because I forgot my earrings this morning, and I got these amazing cross earrings. So anyway, come to the Reminding, and they're the ones that make all this possible, and I'm so super thankful for them, not only in my life, but in the life of our community. So, Marie.
Yes, ma'am.
So all I first knew of you is there was this amazing nonprofit that was started in our area that was bringing birthdays to kids that didn't have one. And I didn't really understand for a long time, just because, being in the thick of the work that I was in at the time, the story behind that. And that's what I would love for you to share with others today, because we get a lot of people who reach out to me, and or I have, when I was going through this with Phoenix, saying, at least you have your son back. And I couldn't be, you don't really understand what it's like to lose a son in that loss. And so I kind of have this thing about, I want to understand that loss. And it helps me process my own in ways. And so, but others really have lost, especially children that are still reeling from the grief. And so I'm really hoping that you can bring some hope and some healing and some balm of Gilead stuff to them as they listen to this, so they can find hope in the way that you have, and turn that into hope for others the way you have. First, I want to start out, though, your faith journey, because I know in all of this, I always tell people, I don't know how anyone experiences a broadside in life or experiences loss of any sort when, all seems lost and all hell breaks loose. How does one do that without the Lord? How does one do that without faith? So how did you grow up? Did you grow up with faith? Where was the Lord in your life? How did that develop through faith? And take me kind of through those seasons.
So growing up, I was born into a Sicilian Catholic family, and an Irish Sicilian Catholic family. Honestly, both of my parents were raised Catholic. My mother was very devout Catholic, to the point where I can remember as a child, my father worked for the post office back in the day when they had special delivery, which means he worked on Sundays sometimes because we didn't have UPS, Amazon Prime, and all the stuff we have now. So we would get up and go to Mass across town at 5 a.m. so that we could go to Mass as a family before my daddy went to work. And God rest both of their souls. But one of the things that I started to learn, feel, and get a tug over time, a lot of time, was that something was missing there. And I didn't know what it was. And maybe it's because I felt like as a family in those days, we were putting on more of a face than a faith.
I like that.
And then I watched my dad kind of bring in some new age hippie stuff into the mix.
Yeah.
So, I'm this strange gumbo of new age Catholic, not knowing exactly as a young adult which direction to take that in.
That's interesting.
But I do, in the Catholic Church, you're baptized as a baby and you go through your first communion. You eventually in your, around 8th grade or so, you're confirmed,
Right.
which is more, to me, I think of it as a rebaptism. It's the point in your life where you accept Christ for yourself, which is what baptism is in a lot of other denominations. And I can tell you a really interesting story about that related to Brooke. But my parents got divorced when I was young, so I wasn't in Catholic school any longer, and I wasn't necessarily going to, CCD classes the way other kids did when they were in public school. At the time, I should have been confirmed. So I was a young attorney in New Orleans, and decided at that point in my life that, I'm going to make this public statement and be confirmed. I was with a group at the cathedral, at St. Louis Cathedral. It was beautiful. But still, as my faith continued to grow, I just kept searching for that. Where's the relationship part? And I'm also kind of nerdy. I like to study. I want to know more. And so I ended up on a journey. And, now my husband and I attend a Methodist church, a former Methodist church when we're here in town. We attend a Lutheran church when we're out of town, where our second place is. But at the time of Brooke's accident, I can say I was in, and thank God, I was in the strongest faith place I've ever been in my life through all of that journey.
That's interesting.
And I do honestly believe if I had not been, I probably would not be sitting here with you.
I totally understand that.
I just, I wouldn't have, because I knew in the early morning hours after that accident that I had a choice to make.
Yes.
And I could either go left, straight to darkness.
That's right.
Or I could go right and just hold on to my faith. And those are my only two choices.
Yes.
And thank God the Holy Spirit has.
It really is two choices.
It is.
There is no gray area.
Not for me. Not then.
You have to choose. And it's interesting you say that, because that I feel like that becomes very real, that choice in a moment of such sorrow.
Yeah. And yeah, it's that black or white.
Yeah.
When things are that dark, you can be pulled darker.
It's a lifeline, right?
Or you can go to the light.
Yes, there's a lifeline you can take, or you can sink. I've experienced the same. Yeah. I even have moments when I'm tired. What are we going to choose today? So it was a daily walk for me as well.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's almost 8 years coming up in March. It's still a daily walk.
Daily walk.
It's still a choice.
Because it was 2017, right? That it happened.
March 16th.
So how did God, before we get into that, how did God, when we initially talked, you said he prepared me how to respond to this type of sorrow.
So
What does that look like? What did that look like in your life?
I have to say, I'd have to go back even as early as, when I was about 21. My first significant loss in my life was my mama, my daddy's mother, like a mother to me. And before then, I really had not experienced loss. So that I got a taste of loss there. And then in the fall of 1997, my stepbrother, who was, I think he was 19, 20 years old at the time, he had been in our lives since he was 2 years old. He was shot and killed on a school bus in Arkansas. And I remember watching my dad and my stepmother.
From a random shooting?
Oh, it's more complicated than that. It was a beef between he and another kid.
Wow.
And the child shot him on the school bus.
Wow.
Yeah. It was surreal because that kind of trauma, that kind of out of the blue,
wow.
I had never experienced.
Yes.
And
especially
I watched
the violence of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, it was.
We kind of expect when someone grows old that you would lose them one day, but a violent taking away, that's with some,
that was that first step into dealing with being truly blindsided.
Truly broadside, yeah.
And I watched my dad and my stepmom and us as a family process through that. And 6 months later, my younger brother died.
Wow.
He was 27 years old. He had had a series of heart incidents and some deep vein thrombosis in all 6 of the deep veins in his lower leg, which is unheard of for someone that age. And as he was going in to have open heart surgery, they discovered that he had a genetic condition that was causing everything. So they were prepared for that as best they could going into the surgery. Did 4 bypasses 3 days after. One of the bypasses was completely blocked, and he suffered a heart attack.
Wow. Where was he?
He lived he was living in Texas at the time with his wife and his.
Was he out in the yard? Was he at home? Did he?
No, he was in the hospital.
Oh, he was in the hospital.
He had not even been released from the open heart surgery.
Wow.
It was just 3 days later. His son was 15 months old. My niece was 4 at the time. And just maybe the first time in my life where my knees were just completely swept. Like I can remember my dad calling me in the middle of the night to tell me about that. And
did you ever think, not another one? Like, what were your thoughts toward God? Were they like, did you think about the one that you just grieved? Did you think about him in a cluster?
I'm not sure that I stopped to really talk to God about what was going on.
Interesting.
Because I shut that grieving process down because right after my brother Jay died, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter Megan. And so then your whole world turns over in a good way.
Yeah.
But it became an excuse not to have to process fully everything that was happening at that point. And it was many years later that I ultimately processed the loss of those 2 brothers back to back that way.
Interesting.
And then my daddy died in 2001. So all of those things. And then another difficult situation that we were going through as a family, just right before Brooke's accident, we had a close family member who was abused. And we were going through all of the legal and whatnot, like together as an extended family. We were supporting this person. And 10 days before Brooke's accident, we were in criminal court in Orleans Parish for the sentencing of the person who abused this family member. And we all, as we left that courtroom that day, thought we were turning a chapter. You know, I mean, like when our just collective family just was around this person. And 10 days later, Brooke's accident.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
10 days later. So God was just laying the groundwork for things are going to be hard, but you've got a path, and I'm here.
Right.
I was on the right path, thank God, at that time, because that one broadsided me. Didn't see that one coming.
So take us to the moment.
So that day, I was kind of strange. My husband and I had had tickets to this dinner at Oxlot for weeks. And I kept saying, who are we going to, we had 2 sets of tickets to this. It was a tasting of some sort. And I was like, who are we going to invite to go with us? And we kept putting it off. He comes home from work, 5 o'clock, dinner's at 6 o'clock. I'm like, who are we going to take to dinner? He's like, well, let's call our friend Scott and Jane. I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, Scott and Jane have their prayer worship practice on Thursdays. They're not going to be available. Why are we going to bother them with this? Lo and behold, the preschool had the church that day, and prayer worship practice wasn't happening. So they're like, sure. Last minute, they decided to come with us. So we're getting ready, and right before we were about to walk out the door to get in the car with Scott and Jane to drive over to Oxlot, I looked at my phone because I had I can even go back further in the day. I kind of jumped ahead on you. Wow.
You can switcheroo. We're good at rabbit trails around here.
So Brooke actually worked in my office. I was an attorney at the time. And she worked in my office. And that particular day, I needed her to come to my office, take a court run to the courthouse, and bring it back to me because I couldn't wait for her to give it to me the next day. Plus, she was on her way to a horse show. She wasn't going to be there the next day. So she was in my office, and we had lunch together, and she was heading out. My phone rang. I picked it up, and I knew the person on the other end. I said, hold on a sec. Was telling her goodbye. And she tells me, I said, I'll see you when you get back, thinking that she still had to make the court run. She was actually on her way to the horse show, and she's like, I'm not coming back. And I didn't process it. I just got on the phone and carried on my day. But then the events of the rest of the afternoon, like I said, our friends were coming to pick us up. I picked up my phone because I had a black box in her car. And by this point in the afternoon, I knew she should have been getting close to the showgrounds in Gulfport. And I could see she was a mile away. And I said, I remember, I was like, I'm not going to call her or text her because she's in her car. She drove a stick shift. I didn't want her picking up her phone because Mama called her.
Right.
I said, I'm going to call her when we get, before we walk into the restaurant because she'll be there by then. We get in the car to go to the restaurant, and my phone rings when we're just 3-4 blocks from the house, and it is the trainer's daughter, Catherine. Say, Marie, there's been an accident. Brooke's unconscious. I said, okay. I'm turning around. I'm going home. We're getting in the car. We'll head to Gulfport. You just call and tell me where to meet you, because I knew in my heart that I was going to meet her at the hospital and everything was going to be okay.
So you had that didn't even enter your mind that she was gone?
No. I had, and I will tell you, I'll share with you, when I heard you share your testimony for the first time and you shared how bold and loud you were with your prayer, I was so kind of envious, like, if I was that bold and loud. But what I know is that my heart was so confident.
It was there already.
I didn't have
You
to
didn't
shout
have
it
to,
out.
yeah.
It's like I literally
You were already grounded in faith.
I
Didn't even enter.
No, it wasn't like I was really asking God to make her safe and to take care of her.
No, you just had an
knew it.
assurance,
It
right?
was almost like I was just saying, thank you. I
Right.
know she's safe.
Right.
And
Right.
by the time we didn't even get in our, like through the garage and in our kitchen, my phone rang again. I looked down. It was Catherine's number. But when I said hello, it was her dad, TJ, who was Brooke's trainer. And TJ said, Marie, she didn't make it. We lost her.
What was your for someone that went in with an assurance, didn't even enter their head that they were gone? Because for me with Phoenix, it was like, is he dead or alive? I knew I didn't know what I was getting. You were just like, oh, I'm going to get there and she's going to be unconscious. We're going to have to, have a little challenge, but we're going to come out of this. What was how did you react? Were you in shock? Were you in disbelief? Were you like, what was it?
It was absolutely complete and utter shock, to the point to where from that moment and for a lot of time, like through this process, I literally see the events unfolding as if I was standing across the room or if I was standing behind me. Because when he said those words, I just screamed no, like in a way that I couldn't even replicate for you if I tried, and my knees literally buckled. I thought that kind of stuff really just happened in movies when people were being dramatic.
No. Your whole nervous system was overtaken.
It just, and I'm that person who's always buttoned up, who always knows how to take care of things.
You're a lawyer.
You've got a plan. And so
a lawyer and a single mom, I mean, you were a beast.
Well, at that time, luckily, my husband and I we had just gotten married about a year and a half before.
So glad you had that.
Oh, amen. He really was and still is. I mean, he's there. He's that.
So
person.
was he there when you?
He literally was standing behind me. I mean, it feels like almost simultaneously he's catching me and he's calling our friends Scott and Jane back, and they turned around and came back.
And what did you do after that? Did you get carried to her room?
No, I was staying. We were in the kitchen, so I kind of braced myself.
Oh, you were in the kitchen. Okay.
At the island, and Todd took my phone because the coroner in Harrison County needed to get information and whatnot. So Todd was handling that, and then also making plans for us to go to Gulfport. Which, in hindsight, part of me is trying to figure out why we had to go there, because we met with the coroner, but we didn't get to meet Brooke because
and I'm
of
thinking as a mom,
everything.
how do you get that news so far away in that span of time? Like, I gotta get to my girl.
But I'm so. Yeah, and I had to wait, though. I had to wait.
That's was crazy to me.
It was Saturday before I actually could get to her. And then the interim became getting to my girl, Megan, her older sister. Because she was at college. She was a freshman, and she was at Virginia Tech at the time. I call her my supplemental daughter. My ex-husband, Brooke and Megan's dad's older daughter from his first marriage, lived in Richmond, still does, and she and her husband, and they had their daughter Eloise actually was turning 1 the next day. We're getting in the car to drive to Blacksburg so that somebody would be with Megan when she got the news. Unfortunately, before that could happen, people started calling her, texting her, because things leak out. Friends start texting, people start putting stuff on Facebook, or whenever. And before I could get someone there with her, she called me.
Oh boy.
And I was on the phone. She called my phone. I was on the phone with my brother, John, trying to update him on what was going on. My husband, Todd, was standing next to me, and his phone rang, and it was Megan. I said, John, I have to go. And I get on the phone with Megan, and she says, Mom, what's going on? People are calling me. People are texting me. They said, Brooke's been in an accident. I said, she has. And she said, is she okay? I said, no, baby, she's not. And just the heartbreak of listening to her have to deal with that by herself was really more than.
Especially because she's probably thinking, well, this is serious, but she's gone. How did you tell her? Did you say she didn't make it?
No, she knew what I meant. She knew what I meant.
She knew?
Yeah, she understood. She understood. Unfortunately, her sister and her husband got her out of her dorm, and they spent the night in a hotel together. They got her on a flight home first thing the next morning, and I went and picked her up at the airport and just held her.
How are you processing the loss at this time? Did it even occur to you at this time, her last words, back to what you were saying was,
no,
I won't be back.
Yeah, I'm not coming back. I didn't process that. I didn't process that till later. And honestly, Kim, I look back at that day, like picking Megan up from the airport. I probably had no business being on the road myself. I hadn't slept.
Right.
And I woke up. Oh, I didn't wake. I got out of bed about 5 o'clock in the morning because I'm like, at least let Todd get some sleep. And I was concerned that morning, early in those morning hours. We had not reached all of the family members to share the news. It was a significant accident. It was a 4-car accident. It had the highway, or the little back highway 53, shut down for hours in Mississippi. It was on the news.
She hit.
So what happened was, as best the accident reconstructionists and whatnot can put it together, is she and one of her friends who were headed to this horse show in Gulfport were driving, and somehow, some way, she ended up rear-ending a white truck. Now, she's driving a little Mazda, or Honda Civic, rather, 2 doors,
right,
stick shift. It was a little bitty car, but she was our safest driver, which that was another broadside. Like, she knows how to drive. What's going on? So she rear ends the truck, and for some reason, the truck decides to leave the initial accident and takes a left. So that truck goes left, and there's another truck coming from the other direction who was speeding. He swerved to miss the initial truck, came back across the highway and killed Brooke instantly.
Oh, wow.
And
so it wasn't the initial, her hitting, it was one trying to miss that truck that she did and on impact.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think the most heartbreaking thing about that piece of it is that we learned through the trial, when that driver's expert was on the stand and was being cross-examined by Brooke and Megan's dad's attorney, that expert admitted that if the driver he was representing had been going the speed limit from the point where they knew he had first entered the highway to that point, he would have had 15 seconds to react.
Wow.
And you think about all the times that you had to hit your brakes
Yeah.
because of something happening
Right.
in traffic. 15 seconds is life and death.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that piece of it, at the same time as it makes me frustrated and angry at how senseless
Right.
the accident is, it does provide some solace that, all those little doubts of, well, were you doing what you were supposed to do in the
Right.
car? And, a lot of people speculate, oh, she must have been on her phone.
Right,
I can
right,
tell you
right,
she was
right.
not on her phone.
Right.
I've got her phone records. Her phone actually was on her person in some way, shape, or form because it made its way to the funeral home. And, paramedics don't grab stuff out of the car to
Right.
take with you. That went with her.
Interesting.
And because the day after the accident, after we picked Megan up, her dad and Megan and my husband Todd and I, the four of us actually went to the wreckage yard where Brooke's car was taken. Me specifically looking for her phone. Like, that generation is so tied to their phone, their pictures, their everything. I wanted to be able to preserve that. So we knew it wasn't there, but thankfully, it had been on her, and it was gathered with her belongings, and we got that back. But just a very surreal day, really leading into a surreal week.
Right. With the funeral.
Yeah, I mean,
How was it being there?
so I can remember.
Were you still in shock? Were you tuned out? Were you angry? Were you just in such sorrow you don't remember the week?
Like I was telling you, like I see things from perspectives. Like I can still see myself walking into the funeral home on that Saturday morning to meet with the family to make plans for her service, as if I'm standing at the door filming me walking in, and it like stopped me in my tracks because like I had to stop and just catch my breath because the realization, like,
You're like, I'm here for
I'm walking through these doors to plan this service for my baby.
Yes, yes.
My baby. She was 17 years
Like,
old.
what am I doing here?
She had chosen her dorm room the day before that accident. She was planning and living life. There was nothing to indicate that today was going to be the day. But
people always say that they had some kind of restlessness that day, or did you get?
the only thing,
I always hear when I hear these stories, like I hear, something was off, or they got something.
The only thing when I went back and realized was when I picked up my phone to see where she was on that black box. That was the time of the accident.
Wow.
And I didn't feel anxious about it. I was like, I remember just saying, okay, she's almost there. I'm going to wait. But yeah, we were walking out the door right at that time, and I think that was God letting me know that was the time. That's when she came to me. Came home to me.
How was her faith in the Lord?
So, Brooke and I had very interesting conversations. One of the things that I guess if I had any regrets in the way I did some things is I wish maybe I had been stronger in my own faith journey to be able to bring my kids more strongly into faith. But I do believe she was a believer. And God has revealed himself in ways that I firmly believe that he has my baby girl. One of the things that happened when, right at the time of this accident, see, here's how God also knows things. So in January, before this accident, my husband was still working at the time. His company came to us and said, we're looking at a merger. If this happens, we'd like for you guys to move to Minnesota and oversee this merger, huge merger. And the two things that they were waiting on for that to happen, one was approval from the U.S. government. The other was approval from the Canadian government because of, monopolies and whatnot. The approval from both governments came on the date of Brooke's accident.
Wow.
And so, we ended up, they came to me afterwards and to Todd and said, if this is too much, then you guys let us know. Mm-hmm. And I told Todd, I said, we didn't know in January what was going to happen, but God did.
Right.
If you were coming to me today saying, Marie, they want us to move to Minnesota, I would have said, there is no way.
Yeah.
But because that had already been planted, I was like, okay, I can do that. And so we ended up in Minnesota, and then from Minnesota, we ended up in Ohio. While we were in Ohio, we attended this beautiful non-denominational church that when you went there every Sunday, you were those sermons were coming straight from the Bible.
Relationship.
Yeah, I literally
for someone who was trying to find the relationship aspect, it was like you were just like down in relationship,
taking notes.
Yeah, Jesus was just pouring in. Yeah,
and it happened to be a Sunday on Megan's birthday, about 2 years after the accident. We're in church that day, and it was Baptism Sunday, and so the pastor, in really the most beautiful, gentle way that I could express, was explaining to the congregation why they don't believe in baptism at birth. And I know when we first talked about this, you asked me about being angry with God.
Right.
And
I always ask anyone who has ever experienced loss or trauma, were you ever angry with God? Because that's where most people take it when they come to me in sorrow about loss.
As I was sitting there listening to him go through this, I started fighting with God. I was telling him, I was like, God, I marked those girls. I baptized those girls at birth, and I gave them to you. I sealed them with your promise. And I'm like, I was baptized at birth. Like, I need to know. And Kim, when I looked up on the screen, the name of the young woman who was being baptized was on the screen. And it was Aaron Brooke. Brooke's name is Brooke Aaron. And I just, tears just started streaming down my face. I'm like, okay.
That was a God.
You're calming me down.
He's speaking.
You're talking me off the ledge.
He's talking you off the ledge. He's like, I know when you marked her, I knew what was going to happen.
Yep.
And I knew you were going to be okay. I knew she was going to be okay. That's what that tells me that you just said.
Amen. That absolutely. All of that.
Because everyone's like, why couldn't he
know that?
Yes, because this is the thing. They're like, well, if God was God, why did he allow? But if you knew he did allow, like if he gave you a clear sign when you ask him, I marked those babies, how? And he's like, I know, with the Brooke Aaron and the Aaron Brooke. He's telling you, this took me not by surprise. To be honest with you, gives me more comfort and more peace that God knew. Because he's either on the throne or he's not.
Yeah.
He either knows our lives from finish to end or he doesn't. So to say that he didn't allow it, then
he's not all powerful.
He's not all powerful. And then who am I leaning on then when I don't feel powerful and I don't feel in control? So that makes no sense to me. But when you get an affirmation like that, I knew, and you're going to be fine.
You're
Then
okay.
you know you're going to be fine because there's a bigger reason attached, because he's either a good father or he's not. And he is. That's his nature. He can't be anything but, and what he does is good. So if he allowed it, then there was a bigger, grander kingdom purpose.
Yes, there's
that we almost, that I tell people, we become stewards of. Instead of seeing victim, I see, and that's what I had. And, you know, sorry to interrupt, but when you're saying this, I'm like, this is a very important point.
Yeah.
And if we miss it, we're going to miss the whole thing.
Instead of why, what?
Yes.
Not why did this happen, but God, what do you want me to do with it?
And then how?
What can I do with this?
And then how?
What can you do with this?
Yes. Yeah. And that you knew to the point where you didn't take it because you have entrusted me with something that my little minute and finite mind only sees, I lost my daughter, you took my daughter, or you allowed something to happen to her. And he's saying, I know, and there is something.
I'm going to make good of it.
I'm going to make good of it that you don't see yet. That will save many, many, many.
Here's something else, and I told you I would share this with you.
Is it the Me Too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I was going to ask you about that.
This little bracelet right here, it's stamped with Me Too. In 2017, actually my friend Jane, who was with us that day, had kind of introduced me to the notion of choosing a word or phrase
for the year.
Mm-hmm. So back in January, I had chosen Me Too. And I had chosen it because of Brene Brown and C.S. Lewis and that notion of when you share your trials, your story, and somebody else says Me Too,
right.
It's instant connection.
Totally.
It's instant healing. And so I tend to be the person who sits back and I let people talk and I go, oh, me too. And so the Me Too was to remind me that, Marie, you need to be the one to open up and share so that somebody else can say Me Too.
Jesus.
This bracelet was on back order since January. It arrived in my office on March 16th, 2017.
Wow.
And whatever I maybe thought God wanted me to share.
The day of the accident.
Yeah. Whatever it was before then that I thought he wanted me to share, I knew instantly that what I would be sharing would be this journey. And
Jesus.
I mean, and back then I didn't know what that would look like. It led me to blogging. I did blog.
So you started with opening up and sharing your experiences, your feelings, your valley with the public in that way. Yeah. Because that was my initial as well, is from the moment Phoenix went down, I went to Facebook and it was my journal. Everyone saw it as thanks for keeping us informed, but for me, it was my life. Like I'm a communicator. I process verbally. So I needed to do it for me. And so I understand having to blog for yourself, but not just in a diary at home. I had to share something about Me Too. I had to share it, like giving it away, because I got Me Too's back. And then I gave Me Too back. Does that make sense? We were exchanging Me Too bracelets, basically.
Yeah, because, I mean, the Bible tells us that God heals us in all of our trials so that we can heal
a comfort.
those.
Yes.
And be a comfort back. And you don't have to have the exact same pain or suffering to provide comfort to somebody.
No.
Because all of our journeys are individual.
Yes.
They're all different.
That's why I tell everyone is like, what is the good fight? It is, how did you overcome? How did God help you to overcome? Because people always think, oh, well, Phoenix's story is about the miracle God did. Yes, he did a miracle, but that's not it's about overcoming.
And one thing that I think Christians miss a lot is you cannot start to comfort somebody if you skip past the pain.
Yes.
If you show up and slap a little platitude on it, oh, everything happens for a reason. She's in a better place. Wait a minute. even if all of that is true,
I know.
I still hurt.
Hurts.
I'm still suffering.
I'm suffering.
And sometimes you just want someone to say, I see.
I see it.
I see it. I can't imagine it.
Yes.
I don't understand it, but I see you're hurting.
I love that. I love that.
And to be able to do that without trying to
have
fix it.
Answers.
Yeah. There aren't any.
There's no answers to that. Like even with Phoenix, everyone's like, well, at least he's alive. I can't tell you how much that just, yes, I'm thankful he's alive, but there is a loss.
Yeah.
There is a lot daily.
Hopes and dreams.
Hopes and dreams and college and futures and,
Yeah.
oh, well, he'll get back to it. Yes and maybe no. I don't know. I just know that that's a process loss. But you're right, is that, and that's what I was talking earlier about how I opened up or even do the podcast, is that people bypass the pain. And I've heard testimonies and people try to give comfort but leave out the pain. Mm-hmm. And I was in pain and I needed someone to share the pain and the process of the pain. The pain is what, not just the event, but the pain is what I needed to process.
Yeah. Well, you can't process the event if you sweep the pain under the rug.
That's right.
Because it'll just come back to haunt you.
It will come back, and it will come back in a beer bottle. Mm-hmm. It'll come back in
or a red wine bottle.
Or a red wine bottle, which I've been there with all, because I tell people, my transparency. I tried to escape the pain of the loss of it. And I even raised my fist at God, and he's like, really? It's going to be really hard without me, Kim. So, so I kept having to go back to the well going, of surrender.
Well, the good fight is a daily fight.
This
is a spiritual battle.
Spiritual battle.
It's so hard to watch the war in reverse, and we know that the war is won.
Yes.
So it's just this constant, why do we have to do the daily battle?
Why do we have to do the daily battle?
We have to.
And we have to show others how to as well. Yeah. It was like, Kim, you're such a woman of great faith. I'm like, you show me a woman of great faith, and I promise you she's been in pain. I promise you she's had to. I promise you there's things about God she had to learn the hard way.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always been stubborn. That's differently. That's different. That's the loud Kim speaking life into her son's body, saying, over my dead body, he's going to die. So that's more of a stubborn personality thing. But what I'm understanding is that faith, like you said, is the good fight of faith is daily, and it takes endurance. And I didn't have that before. I didn't have that pressing need to persevere through something intense. Nothing had been really, truly intense. I had to persevere and endure. And then I realized, this is real faith. Yeah. This is not just stubbornness and a personality.
This is faith that's been tested and it's
refined.
Yeah. It's not just tacking on to your parents' faith because that's what you've always had and that's what you've always known.
Or I should. This is how I should be acting because I'm a Christian. Yeah. All that flies out the window when the fire is intense and the valley is dark.
And deep.
And there is you cannot see where it ends. You have to trust that he's in there with you.
Yeah. Well, I can honestly say, you asked me about the day of her funeral and that process. On the day of, there were points in time, because I don't know how many people came through, 1,400 people.
Wow.
And it was a warm Wednesday. in March on the 22nd when we buried her.
Which is evidence of the kind of person she was, if that many people came.
I didn't know some of these people. They were friends that she'd met through the horse world. They were friends from school that were school friends that I hadn't met. People stood in line for hours because by the time they got to the front of the kind of reception line to pay their respects, I'd hug them, and they were hot. I mean, I could still feel the sun on their back. And there were different points in time in that day when I literally felt, even when somebody wasn't touching me and physically supporting me, I physically felt the Holy Spirit just literally lifting me up under my armpits, just holding me up.
Yes.
And I had not planned that day to give her eulogy, but as the week unfolded, I was writing a eulogy that I thought our interim pastor was going to read it. But as it unfolded and as things progressed through the week, it really came to me, and I realized that I was the only one who could get up there and read it. And
he gave you that in bits over time.
Absolutely. God,
he even did that.
Oh, yeah. If he had told me
because he knew you would regret. He knew.
Oh.
Right?
He knew I'd regret it, but he also knew that if he had told me that on March 16th, the day of the accident, I'd been like,
no way.
What? Huh?
That's interesting.
But it was one of my last great acts of love to be able to share, with everybody who she was and who her heart was, is. And
you told me she lived her life.
She lived big.
Probably more, lived big, lived large for 17 years, probably than most people do in their lifetime, which is such a gift from God for you to know that she did.
Oh, yeah. She didn't leave anything on the table.
I love that.
And another mercy of how God doesn't tell us more than we need to know in any given moment. If he had told me even a week before, this is what's coming, you're going to get through it, it's all going to be okay, I would have done everything in my power to avoid it, to get her someplace else, to hoard her to myself.
I did that for Phoenix for 17 years because I felt something like this was going to happen. Yeah. But you're right, and you would be a helicopter, you would hoard, and she wouldn't have
had the fullness.
Experienced that life.
She wouldn't have had the full life. She wouldn't have had the relationships that she had. I mean, she just, oh my gosh, she loved children. She loved family. I think to some extent she may have loved animals better than she liked people in general. She was always trying to talk one of us into either, a teacup pig or a miniature goat or something. We didn't fall for that, but her horses and her cats and dogs, and she was a special light and had a big heart, very strong sense of right and wrong. Mm-hmm. The last Mardi Gras right before the accident, she was in the car with her sister and her cousin, and they were on St. Charles, and they could see in front of them a truck of a couple fighting, and it was starting to get physical. And they had to calm Brooke down because she wanted that fixed.
Justice warrior.
She wanted that fixed right now. That she just, even at 17
mama
years
wanted
old,
to go into law.
Well, she also would use the law for petty things. Brooke had a thing for gas prices. She would drive.
You could have told me anything, and that would have not been something I took out of my pocket.
Oh, trust me. Everybody who knows Brooke is laughing right now because she would drive 30 miles out of her way to save 3 cents a gallon.
That is so strange to have. It was your thing.
Well, she had the little Shell card. No offense to Shell. I'm sure it worked fine that day.
I think that is amazing, by the way.
But one day her Shell card didn't activate properly and didn't take her money off. And she wanted me to write a letter on my letterhead to get her 3 cents a gallon back. I said, baby, I'm sorry.
That is very
I'm not gonna
interesting,
do
actually. I've never heard of that. That is awesome.
Yeah, no, that was her. She truly loved horseback riding. It was her therapy because after Katrina, I was a single mom at the time of Katrina. We lived in New Orleans, the girls and I, in Lakeview, not far from Delgado. So I forget what, couple miles from the levee break. And we were on high ground, so we only had 6 feet of water in our house. But we lost everything. And that's how we ended up moving to the North Shore. But Brooke didn't like change. And at 6 years old, that rocked her world. And so I had her in therapy, trying to figure out what to do. And my former sister-in-law, her aunt, my ex-husband's sister, has a farm up in Folsom, or she had a farm at that time. And she's like, she had ridden horses all of her life. And she's like, Marie, let's try this. Let's see how this works for her. And so we put her on a horse, and
it took.
Her aunt, provided lessons for her for a long time, and it became her therapy. And at the same time, it made her who she was in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of responsibility, even at a young age, when you're riding horses, in terms of bathing your horse and brushing your horse and mucking stalls. And as she got older, and she would compete in competition horse shows, the higher competition, she would have to braid the mane and the tail for the horse because they have to look all fancy and whatnot. And that's not an inexpensive thing.
Sure, yeah.
So she started learning how to do it for herself, and then she started doing it for others to make money to help pay for more horseback riding.
Awesome.
And actually, the weekend before the accident, the particular show she was going to is like a 6-week series of shows.
Right.
And the last weekend that she showed, I had gone to Gulfport one night to stay with her, and she came and stayed in a hotel with me instead of staying at the barn with, at the trailer with everybody that from the show. And but she needed to get up to go braid manes and tails before she did her barn chores, which means she needed to be back at the barn at 5 a.m. And I didn't want her to drive it by herself. So I got up at 4:30 in the morning and took her to the barn, dropped her off, and then I went back and got a nap, got dressed, and then went back to spend the day with her, showing and whatnot. And I could even see in that day, and this is God's mercy and grace, just in the little things.
Yeah, in the little things.
Brooke could have a fiery temper, and sometimes that would come out in us butting heads.
Sure.
And a lot of times it happened in the barn, because I'm like, I couldn't understand sometimes when she'd be so down on herself. I'm like, you get to do what you love. Why are you fighting? What are we fussing about?
Right.
But that day, she had been training a horse, a big old horse, he'd been in the barn for a while, so he was very rusty, and he needed work. And so part of what she was doing as a student with the barn was helping to train this horse and trying to get it back into show condition. And this day, this horse just took off with her. I mean, there was nothing pretty about this ride. It was as ugly a ride as you could have. And she came off with a smile on her face. And another little girl overheard asking her, like, gosh, that's a really hard horse. And she's like, oh, but he's so much fun. And, we're just working on him, and he's going to be great.
So she wasn't hard on herself that way.
I'm like, I kind of remember thinking,
what's wrong with you? What's going
on? Are you
on?
okay?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
But it was just little things like that where I did get to see her in those last few months, like going from that young girl to the
wholeness,
young lady.
Yeah.
But like you're talking about this loss of the hopes and dreams.
Yes.
I mean, it just all got cut short.
You almost go, what is all that about?
I know.
What did we work so hard for?
But it was about my comfort.
I know.
God knows.
And maybe your hopes and dreams.
Yeah, maybe.
But what about God's hopes and dreams? Like, you know, I have to like get myself out of the I'm the world. And he's like, no, you're a puzzle piece in the world.
And you should be shining a light to lead others back to me.
Because we're just pilgrims here. So what's the assignment? What's the assignment?
I know.
Marie, what's the assignment?
I received my assignment.
I know. I want you to talk about this because this is what I love about this podcast is, we talk about the real and the raw, but there's always a redemption.
I'm going to share the assignment, but let me share you two ways that God has met me exactly
where we want to hear that.
Like he knows what I need. So we're talking about where was Brooke's faith and like, there was that point, like that doubt, like, okay, I just need to know that you've got her. And I'm not a charismatic kind of believer, but I do believe that God speaks to us. Right. I believe the Holy Spirit, because how else would we know what to do? Right. How do I know what my purpose is?
Exactly.
But he knew my doubt. He knew that doubt needed to be addressed. And one night, it's probably maybe 3 months after the accident, I woke up from a dream with tears of joy streaming down my face. And in this dream, we're at an event, like on a veranda, beautiful veranda type porch, and I'm talking to this elderly gentleman about the event that's about to take place, and I can see Brooke like as a wisp in my peripheral vision. Like she was never a full physical form. I just knew she was there and could see her
presence. And
this was a big event. It felt like it was going to be some sort of pageant or, like almost like a Mardi Gras ball or a prom or a wedding or something big. And she was going to have a role in it. And the elderly gentleman says to me, I'm too old. I'm going to get my son to take her. And he introduces his son. He comes out on the veranda. And I'm kind of waiting for him to, do one of those big, like, get on a knee and, like, will you go to prom with me? And I can see Brooke drop to her knee when he came out. And I was like, that is the Father and the Son. And you are telling me that my girl is there with you.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's what I needed.
Jesus.
I needed to know that. And I know it in my heart.
So the pageant, the cloud of witnesses, heaven, they met her there, and it was a spectacle, and she was the maid of honor.
She was there.
The bride.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so he met us there. The other place where he met me in the strangest reminder is, March 16th.
That is a fantastic.
Isn't that amazing?
I'm bathing in that dream. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
That is quite.
And it wasn't, how you have a dream and you wake up and you're trying to remember.
No, that is like.
This one I woke up and it was like, it just happened in the other room. And my husband walks in, he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, and I tell him, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe. And
that's a biggie.
It was.
That was a biggie.
That's what this mom's heart needed.
I can feel it. I'll move.
It's what allows me then to hear him say that, Marie, this is what you're going to do. And so my purpose has become, it started out, of course, about me. And what I've learned is not about me at all. I guess, May or so of 2019, I saw this beautiful story about a little girl, Bella, in Kentucky. She was in 3rd grade at the time. When she was in 1st grade, I met Bella, so I got to ask her this, and she told me in her sweetest little accent how she came up with this idea about putting together birthday boxes with everything you basically need for an at-home birthday party, and then sharing those with kids in her community who wouldn't have had birthday parties. And so I asked Bella, I was like, how did you come up with this? And she said, well, when I was in 1st grade, a little boy was talking about his birthday party, and he said he never had a birthday party, and that broke my heart. And I was like, oh, that breaks my heart. Like, I wanted, and knowing how much Brooke loved birthdays and
Day to
celebration
feel
and
special,
families.
your day.
I tried to get Bella and her mother to make 20 boxes in honor of Brooke's what would have been her 20th birthday, and I was going to make a donation. And through Facebook, whatever. The mom's like, "We're not set up for that. Just start doing it. Just make 20 boxes and share them." I was like, "Okay." It's kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I made 20 boxes. I called Thomas Mitchell at Hope House because we've been active with Hope House. Now it's been over a decade. I don't even remember when we first really got involved with them, but they are absolutely doing God's work to take children who've been sexually abused and fight for justice for them and fight for healing for them and break that generational hold that abuse has on families. I called Thomas and I said, "Thomas, if I make these boxes, if I bring them to you, can you use them?" He said, "Marie, you have no idea what this would mean to our kids. A lot of them are in foster care. Some of them don't get birthdays." I said, "All right." So we came, me and a couple other family members. We showed up on Brooke's birthday that year, and we delivered 20 boxes. And I said, "Thomas, how many do you really need?" He says, "We saw 400 kids last year." I said, "All right." So the rest, they say, is history.
Right.
And what I thought, Kim, almost 6 years ago, was a little happy for me, has become a healing mission for these children. Hope House and other CACs, because we now serve 6 CACs and 6 other organizations on top of that.
And CACs, just for the audience, are advocacy, children's advocacy centers.
So we're across 19 parishes now. We went from 20 boxes to almost 2,400.
I love that.
And these groups, these volunteers, these counselors who actually provide the boxes to the kids, because I don't see the children who get them.
They're confidential,
they incorporate the boxes into the child's healing.
I love that.
And it becomes a way for a foster caregiver to bond with a child over an activity where the child is the center of the focus.
Their special day.
And it incorporates all of the senses. And smell and taste and hearing. All of it.
And identity.
And
that
so
God made you intentionally. And this is your day. That He chose for you to be celebrated.
And Christmas and Thanksgiving and all those others, beginning of school, all that's important. But today's your
birthday,
day. Today's your holiday.
Yes, that's different.
So we do try as part of that to plant seeds of Jesus and love and hope in the boxes. One of the things we do, we have these beautiful little, I meant to bring a box with me today and I just totally forgot. But we have these beautiful little olive wood crosses. They're about 1.5 inches on a little necklace. They're made in the Holy Land, and we put those in the boxes. But the other way that God reminded me that on my darkest day, He was with me. That accident was 3/16/17. And when you go to John 3:16/17, for God so loved the world.
Jesus.
And when you change that and you say, for God so loved Marie. For God so loved Brooke. Kim. Megan. Todd. Bill. Sue. Jane. For God so loved you. He gave His one and only Son. Then Scripture becomes the living Word. And we put that passage, 3:16/17, on the back of the birthday cards that go in every box. Because if they don't read any other passage in Scripture, if they read that and know that somebody, not just anybody, but the Lord God who made you,
created you, your day, when you were born, your plan and purposes, regardless of who screwed up in your life.
Whoever messed you over,
He hasn't.
all of it.
And He won't.
That's right. And He's willing to give it all.
He did give it all.
Just for you.
If he had to do it all over again, if it was one
would.
person.
Yeah. And
That's the relationship part.
that's the relationship. That's when you realize.
That's the gold of faith. It's not rituals. It's not buildings. It's not organizations. It's not businesses. It's not this. It's not that. It's Jesus gave it all for you
So you
to
wouldn't
come
have to.
close. Love that. I love that, Marie. I really do.
So-
And that is, would you have done this without the death of your daughter?
I don't know. I can't say that I would.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
You know, I know that if Brooke were here and this project came to us, she'd be the first one on board to do it with me. When the girls were younger, one of the projects that we did is we would go at Christmas time and gather, whether it was treats or toiletries or whatever, and pack them and ship them to our troops. Brooke loved that project. And curating birthday boxes is very much like that. We go gather stuff, we get volunteers to gather stuff, we take donations to gather stuff, and we put them in these, pack them in beautiful boxes and get them delivered. She would love that. It touched on everything in her heart. But for me to say that, I would have found this project and dropped everything and done it, I might have still been practicing law.
and you are bringing hope and joy to those who are walking through a darkness of night that you now know intimately what a darkness of night, a valley of sorts, feels like. So it's not a do-gooder who, this would be a great thing to do, is give cheerful, which is great. But when you have when you have a valley experience and you're serving people who are in valleys or have had dark valleys experience, there's something different about that.
There is.
There's something different about
And
that.
sometimes, when we're trying to do good, when we're trying to help others, kind of like that let's skip the pain part.
Yes.
A lot of times you're like, you're not doing well in school. We'll get you a tutor. Well, maybe the real problem is I'm not showing up for school because I don't have electricity and my
Right.
washing machine doesn't work. So I don't have
Right.
clean clothes.
Right.
So I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed. You have to dig
Yes.
back
Yes.
and find where is the source
there's
of the pain.
roots. Yeah, they're roots that need healing.
Yeah.
Not some proverbial.
You can't just prune the tree and
Yes.
expect it to be
get
fixed.
the
You've
root.
got to
Where's
fertilize
the
there.
root broken? Love that, Marie.
Well, that's life. That's I came from a background like that where things were not promised and certain. I lived with a lot of uncertainty at different points in my childhood. And one of the beautiful things about this project is, and I only got to experience this recently, is we're not just providing that love and hope to the children who receive our boxes, but not too long ago, I showed up for a team building event with a team that was part of a larger corporation here in town. And when I started the explanation of Brook It Forward and what we do, I started in a different way. And I approached the group and I said, imagine that you are a 6-year-old little boy, or maybe you're a 9-year-old little girl, and you're at school and you're with your friends and they're talking about their birthday parties that are about to come up, and they're all excited, but deep down you're not excited because maybe you're the 6-year-old little boy whose family doesn't celebrate birthdays because you're getting your groceries from the food bank and there's just not enough money in your budget. Or maybe you're the little girl, the 9-year-old little girl who just disclosed sexual abuse and things aren't really happy. They're a little bit chaotic, to say the least, while you're dealing with, the police and the investigation and, the court system, and you're dealing with healing through counselors, which this wasn't part of your world. And here you are. I said, well, that's where Brook It Forward steps in. And we bring the boxes to the organizations who are serving these children so that they will be remembered on their birthday. And then, we spend an hour and a half or so building boxes. And at the end, this gentleman comes up to me and shakes my hand. And he says, "Hello, I'm so-and-so. I was that 6-year-old little boy."
Wow.
And I just realized for the first time, like, okay, I'm almost 6 years into this, and I'm just now realizing we are touching people
Yes.
that I have no idea.
And he is brooking it forward at that point.
Yeah.
And it's probably putting a puzzle piece back into him.
It's
that
healing.
was taken out. Yes.
It's all the good stuff.
God's using it. Because when God is in it, he'll use a birthday cake. He'll use a burning bush. Mm-hmm. He'll use a donkey. He'll use, an idiot like me. Like, he'll use anyone and anything to get his message of love and I want a relationship with you out. And any way he can.
Absolutely. And I look at what you're doing with this podcast, and the light that you're shedding on grief and that journey is so important.
It is.
Because when you're in that valley, even when
I know.
When God's there, it's still
hard when you don't have people shining lights through it with you.
And one of the most beautiful definitions of faith is trusting in the dark what God showed you in the light.
Yes.
And when it's dark, because even 8 years down the road, there's still dark days.
Yes.
Things catch you by surprise.
Yes.
You can plan for the first Christmas, the first this, the first that. What you don't plan for is your first trip to the grocery store.
Right.
Brooke used to go to the grocery store with me a lot. And the first time I went to the grocery store after the accident to pick up whatever, I get through it. I think I'm doing good, and I'm at the checkout. This little girl checking me out. She gives me my total, and I just start bawling. And I realized that the next thing I would have said at that moment is I would have looked at Brooke and I would have said, "Brooke Posey, you're an expensive date." Because she always threw stuff in my basket that I didn't know was going to be there. And when I went to turn around, I'm like, I don't get to do that anymore. And I feel sorry for that little girl. I'm like, "I'm sorry, it's not you, it's me."
Right.
But it's those little bitty things that you don't know
catches you by
until
surprise.
they get you.
Same.
And and then you just remember, all right, God's with me. We're just gonna wait, and
he knew.
Maybe I need to take a nap today.
It is really that simple sometimes. I need to take a nap. I need to stop busying myself through it.
Maybe I'll go to the reminding and have a coffee and
and hang out with Kim.
See what's going on.
Well, I love that you came and that you shared, and thank you for your transparency. And always, before we wrap up, I always have, would you offer a prayer to those who are walking through the dark, who have experienced loss of some sort or been broadsided in the way that you were? Would love to have you pray us out.
All right, I'm going to share.
And before that, if there anything else you would feel to share that we didn't tap on.
I'm going to share something to help me pray out, honestly. A week or two after the funeral, I was having dinner with a friend of mine who had just studied the book of Revelation with Bible Study Fellowship. And if you know that group, they do their studies kind of almost on a rotation. But they had just done Revelation. And she was sharing with me how she had come to see this beautiful vision of heaven through that study. And she told me, she said, "Marie," she goes, "imagine how you would feel if Brooke walked through that door right now." I know that feeling. I know what that would feel like if she walked through right this
now.
Second. And she said to me, she goes, "That is the worst you will ever feel in heaven." And I'm like, what a beautiful
That is
picture
amazing.
of heaven.
That is amazing.
That picture of heaven brought me to Bible Study Fellowship, and we are actually studying Revelation this year. I waited 8 years to get to this point, but that vision of heaven is what I want everybody to have in their mind as we pray
Amen.
out.
Yes. Yes.
So my prayer would honestly be is like, God, let everybody hearing us today envision in their own world what that would feel like, what that moment of the how our highest high here on earth and in this journey will become our lowest low in eternity, and knowing that we will see you face to face one day. But that until that day comes, you do not abandon us. You do not leave us to wander about this journey alone, that you're always with us. You're here to guide us. You're here to support us. You're here to love us. And grant each one of us the ability to spread your love and hope throughout this broken world. We thank you for giving us this opportunity today, and we pray that we will bring you glory in the name of your Son, Jesus.
Amen. Thank you so much again. And thanks everyone who tunes in to listen. And I hope you have a great day.